Greetings, fellow Americans. Susanna for President 2024. Welcome to the 2023 reboot of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Fireside Chats. Let's talk about mental health for a few moments. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder in 2007. So mental health is important to me. The skills that I learned and the self-evaluation that I conducted really helped me become a much better manager of my mental health. I'm going to pass along some of those things to you today, and hopefully they will help someone somewhere. I viewed counselors as educators. They are educators in our mental health. We have our educators for our basic knowledge, such as math and science and history, civics. But we do also need those educators in mental health. They really helped me. And I utilized them whenever I needed them. I wasn't afraid to. The first step is really wanting to overcome your traumas and your symptoms of mental illness. Some mental illness are too advanced to be managed without medication, and that's okay. Medication can help a great deal, and I know many people who take medication to manage their mental health issues. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the questions that I would ask myself during my self-evaluations that helped me manage my mental health and overcome the symptoms of my post-traumatic stress disorder. The first question that I would ask myself is, am I triggered? It took me a while to really realize what it was that caused me to be triggered. And no situation was the same as another situation. And it's important to realize that. Once I was able to realize that I was triggered, I was able to determine how often I was triggered. And I asked myself that whenever I started my first week of evaluating how often during the day I was triggered. And oftentimes with trauma, we can be triggered multiple times a day and not even realize it. So keeping track of how often was really important in this evaluation. After I was able to determine how often I was triggered, I had to think about what it was exactly that triggered me. And this is where I started to get more detailed about sentences and situations, because sometimes it would be a memory that was brought up. It could be something that someone said, a specific way that they phrased something. And I think we've all experienced things like that, where someone phrases something a certain way and it really just sets you off. Like, did he really just say that? Self-evaluation. I oftentimes would think about what I was physically doing prior to being triggered, and that also helped. Realizing what I was thinking and feeling as well prior to being triggered at any time really helped as well. I also was able to determine what was happening to me when I was triggered. Things that came to mind were thoughts and feelings such as depressive thoughts, very angry thoughts, very anxious reactions. Those are just some examples. One of the questions that I started asking myself once I realized what it was that was triggering me was, what was I doing to calm myself? When I first started evaluating and realizing the answers to these questions, I did not have any skills to be able to combat or overcome my symptoms of trauma and of my diagnosis. So it was really important for me to be able to think about these things and to learn the new skills that I needed to learn. And I value my counselors and I thank them for that, because the skills and techniques that they taught me and helped me to practice really did make a huge, significant difference in my life. After I started learning these skills and techniques to calm myself, I started to realize that I didn't want to react the ways that I was reacting. And so, working with my counselors and constantly self-evaluating and thinking about myself and my personality helped me to determine how I wanted to react. And putting that into practice really did make a difference, and it showed in my counseling sessions. It is important to practice these things, because without that practice, you don't get into the rhythm of it. This is one of the ways that we can change our own behaviors, and it applies to not just trauma. We can use these skills and techniques of self-evaluation to change bad habits that we don't like about ourselves, or different behaviors that we exhibit, but we really don't want to be exhibiting those, and we don't really understand why. Once I reached the point where I could decide on what reactions I wanted to have and putting them into practice, I found that it became easier for me to evaluate. And then I realized that I wasn't triggered as often, that I wasn't experiencing the symptoms of my PTSD diagnosis as often. And that really made me happy. And I started to pass along some of these things to others. And it has helped a lot of other people. And I'm really happy to say that. Practice makes perfect. That is something that we hear all the time from different sources. Practice makes perfect. And it's very true with this as well. Continuing to recognize when you're triggered is really important. And once you're able to do so, once you realize that you're able to do so, it does become easier. This is part of our self-awareness, and accepting these things about ourselves really helps us to decide on the best course of action to better ourselves. It also helps in our daily lives to understand that patience is needed in self-evaluation. Nothing's going to happen immediately. It takes time, and that's okay. As long as we're making the effort, it shows. It's important to remember that we're all works in progress. All of us are. And striving to become our better selves and to overcome things like trauma and bad habits and the little things that could bother us during any given point is going to help all of us in the long run. I hope that everything that you've listened to today helps in some way. I hope that at least one thing you got out of this is that we do have the power to change ourselves. That is all for today. Thank you for your time, and may our path lead to peace and prosperity.